Good afternoon, and welcome to the final day of the American Women's History Initiative's 2020 Symposium, American Women of Science, Recovering History, Defining the Future. I'm your host, Jennifer Schneider, Program Manager for the American Women's History Initiative. Over the last 2 weeks, you've joined us for 6 afternoons of sessions that shed light on the history of women in science. Today, we will turn our attention to the future of women in science. The American Women's History Initiative, because of her story, is an ambitious undertaking to research, collect, document, display, and share the compelling story of women. We believe that by telling a more complete, nuanced history, we can better understand our nation's past and use it to shape the future. Before we begin this afternoon's sessions, I'm going to go through a few details about how this will all work. First, we are recording this session, and the recording will be made available afterwards through our website, womenshistory.si.edu. We are also offering live closed captioning of this event, which you can enable on the bottom bar. This program is being conducted in listen and view only mode, which means your microphone is muted and cameras are disabled. Today, please feel free to share your thoughts with us on social media using the hashtag #BecauseOfHerStory. I'm thrilled to hand it over to Dr. Oris Sanjur, Acting Director of the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute. Oris?
Good afternoon. Thank you, Liz, Jennifer, and Katrina, and to the American Women in History Committee for this wonderful opportunity to deliver today's keynote as the focus of this inspiring symposium moves from recovering history to define the future. My heartfelt thanks to all of you online for taking the time out of your busy day to join us for the next 20 minutes or so. Please let me tell you how deeply honored I am to share this space, to represent the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and to address all of you. I recognize that I stand on the shoulders of many who came before me, who led the way by mentoring and example, and I hope to spark a bit of that inspiration and motivation in you today. During the past few days, the symposium has recovered invaluable information from less known histories. We can all learn from past women in science, and in doing so, pave the way for a more diverse, equitable, and inclusive future for ourselves and upcoming generation of female scientists. My name is Oris Sanjur Fonseca, and I'd like for you to get to know me a bit better as a person. I am like you, with dreams, with fears, with problems, successes, and failures. I am curious about the world, about nature, about how we are connected and what drives those connections. And perhaps that is why I decided to become a scientist. My family is from a small rural town called La Concepcion de Bugaba in Panama, about 45 minutes from the border of Costa Rica. That's where I lived my childhood, and I went to elementary school and completed my high school. At that time, the University of Panama was the institute of the highest learning in the country. So I applied, and as I worked under my undergraduate degree, my relationship with the Smithsonian began. That was about 30 years ago, believe it or not, back in 1989. So I was working as a research assistant for 2 years as part of my undergraduate thesis project, and I went on to earning my bachelor degree in biology from University of Panama. But I made a decision to keep growing, both as a person and as a scientist, to pursue my goal. So I applied for a scholarship and completed my PhD in cell and developmental biology at Rutgers, the State University of New Jersey. I returned to STRI as a postdoctoral fellow in 1998. During that time, I studied relationships between wild and domesticated form of cucurbits, pumpkins and squash, and in doing so, I used molecular biology tools. So I then went and spent 10 years as a manager and a researcher in the molecular biology and evolution laboratory at STRI. And after those 10 years, I was named Associate Director for Science Administration at STRI. As such, I was responsible for maintaining high standards of scientific operational support for the Institute research programs. And that was a position that I held for 10 years. I did not fully understand how key that opportunity was to my personal and professional development until 5 months ago, when I was named STRI Acting Director and the first Panamanian, the first woman to lead this amazing institute in its over 100 years of history. So one might ask, how does a young woman, or anyone for that matter, from a modest family in a third world country set such high standard for herself? The answer is simple: attitude and hard work. Attitude is very important in how you see things, in how you turn challenging moments in your life into opportunities or let them go by. This is critical in defining your future, especially for women in science. A few key happenings led me to be where I am today. On a more personal level, personal decisions, persistence, discipline, learning to know myself, my values, my areas of improvement, and understanding and accepting that regardless of where I am, I need the support of my family and my friends. These personal decisions, together with other critical factors, led me to a successful career within the Smithsonian. One of the key to internal success is recognizing the value of this institution, understanding its sometimes very complex processes, feeling a passion for the Smithsonian, and understanding your role within the institution and within the mission as well. There are ups and downs, as anyone who has been in this institution for long enough will tell you, and just as there are anywhere else and in life. But if you understand your role and how critical that is to the institution, you can draft goals that are meaningful and generate knowledge that is valuable. So I'd like to share one example that was part of my first experience as a lab manager. So I was trained as a scientist. I was never trained to be a communicator, to be a leader, to know about conflict management. I returned to Panama, and as I began working as a lab manager, I was handed a lab full of students and researchers. And many times they came to me looking for advice about not only science, but their personal lives and professional lives. So I quickly realized that I needed to learn how to manage people, how to be a leader if I wanted to be effective. That helped me understand that I had to find opportunities for myself. And I looked for multiple sources of information and training courses, and of course, for mentors who could guide me and who could share their experiences with me. I also worked very hard to develop connections outside the Smithsonian with the local scientific community in Panama and in the region. And it was a way to learn, but most importantly, it was a way to give back. To this day, those external connections and network has been crucial for opening doors for the Smithsonian as for me as a person. And I feel inspired to be in a position where I can help open doors for others, to lend my shoulders to women and men, to scientists and non-scientists, to lean on me with confidence. I am truly moved to work together with younger, upcoming generations. There are three areas that are pretty critical and important to me that also define the challenges that I face, and I'm surely that you're familiar with those as well. One is generating scientific knowledge, pursuing gender equality, and seeking equal education opportunities for people of all backgrounds. These three areas are certainly define me, and they impact what I have done and have accomplished for the past 30 years. They are also representative of some of the challenges that new generation of scientists will need to face. In terms of generating scientific knowledge, science can no longer be confined to a lab. It needs to be diffused and shared amply. Society needs to see the value in scientific research. It is learning from this pandemic is that science is a key component for the decision-making process that is our responsibility as humanity and as a species. This is the right time to ask questions about the role that we play as women, as scientists. How do we become agents of change through science? How do we make our science more impactful? How do we effectively communicate the relevance of what we do? When we talk about education, we also need to talk about how we support informal education. In my process of growing as a professional, I realized there is an informal education component that was key for reaching my goals. There are areas in me as a person and as a woman that I had to focus and had to develop. For example, the skills to manage conflict, more effective communication. And as I mentioned earlier, I decided to develop those skills for leadership. Those are decisions that each of us need to make. Once I decided what I wanted to focus on my path to a professional development, I also considered supporting education at other levels. I educated myself in non-traditional areas, and I decided that I wanted to have an active role in supporting the education of others. Throughout my career, I have had the opportunity and privilege to mentor and support many students at different levels. I have been a mentor and a counselor to students from all over the world. Today, I'm so deeply honored and satisfied to see how many of those students who once asked for my counsel are now in positions at universities and institutions in many countries around the world, being successful and helping others to succeed. I often get asked about the challenges that emerge from being the only female director of a science unit. And how do I overcome those challenges? So let me address this for a minute. Understanding challenges is key to understand what needs to change. And as a director, it has been very important to be open, transparent, to address difficult issues with kindness and empathy, to make decisions, to recognize and support the values that I get from my staff here at Strive. And most importantly, to be grateful for the opportunity to serve others and to work towards a better world. Another common question that I get asked is, what are the challenges and barriers that women in science face? It's a very common question. So we need to consider the barriers that are obvious and those that are not, like unconscious biases and the responsibilities that we assume. Also, recognize that there are many forms of harassment, and that continues to be an issue. Harassment from unwanted comments to expectation for us to assume traditional roles assigned to our gender, and the more serious cases of sexual or verbal harassment. When that happens, speak up for yourself and support others who might be in vulnerable situations. Many studies have shown that women in science face what is called a scissor effect, where at the undergraduate level, there is a high percentage of women who are interested in pursuing scientific careers. However, the proportion of women drops significantly as they progress from undergraduate to higher academic levels. Some of the factors that we can mention that can contribute to this phenomenon include perceived stereotyping, work-life balance concern, and internalized gender norms. I am also a mother. I have an amazing and beautiful daughter that was born during the time that I was doing my postdoc and the time that I needed to be most productive. So I am very aware of the challenges that younger female scientists face when making important decisions in their life, such as getting married or having a family during the most productive years of their career. We need to have policies in place that allow women to grow and feel supported. Now let's address mentoring. Mentoring is a key and necessary for breaking the barriers to success. In my personal experience, mentors play a very important role. When I needed to make critical decisions, it was extremely useful to talk to what I call my personal board, a term that I learned from our dear Claudine Brown, a woman with exceptional talent, an amazing leader, mentor, and teacher. I have people around me whom I trust and help me in moments of need and also are with me to celebrate my moments of joy. I truly encourage you to find your own sounding board, your mentors, but make sure that you also mentor others. You will learn in ways that are irreplaceable and inevitably will become better at what you do. So, and in spite of all that we face, it is up to each of us to decide how to keep moving ahead, how to keep swimming with joy. I believe that this has to do with your own values. Do what you do, convinced that what you do is what you love. This feeling of accomplishment contributes enormously to feelings of satisfaction. I know and also embrace that there are risks of losing hope, especially if you've had negative experience early during your career. But if you push with perseverance to find your mission and your passion and understand that what you do contributes to a world and is in alignment with your own values, it will bring you joy to both your personal and professional life. We'll keep talking about the future. But before we do so, let's take a moment to honor the past. As you all know, this year, we celebrate the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment and women's constitutional rights to vote. And like this, there are many celebrations that recognize the accomplishments of many women that paved the way before us. Yet, even today, we continue to fight to be heard, to overcome gender barriers. For the future, I dream that we all, men and women, can work towards a world where we all have equal opportunities, a world where being a woman taking a leadership position is the norm, not the exception, a world where there's no stereotype for education and science. It depends on all of us to build a better world for current and future generations. Please let me close by saying something that you probably heard a million times. Be true to yourself. It is okay to have fear, but don't let fear own you. Always try to find opportunities in moments of challenge. Those are the times when you can learn significantly. And always speak to yourself and to others with kindness and positive words. This reminds me of a word and a saying that I very much love. What we have done for ourselves alone dies with us. What we have done for others and for the world remains and is immortal. Thank you again for joining today and for listening to the story of this Panaminita, a Panamanian, a Hispanic woman, and a Smithsonian colleague. I dearly hope that you find inspiration to follow your dreams, your goals, and spark your own song. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your inspiring keynote, Oris. I'm excited to be able to ask you a few questions from our audience. First, how early did you develop a love for scientific research? What inspired you?
Well, Jen, thank you so much for that question. Well, when I was a young girl, I was probably 15 years old or so, I was very curious. I am actually the oldest of four siblings. And my mom is a mathematician. And so she's a woman in science as well. So I developed this passion and interest for nature. And I always wanted to ask questions. So when I started my high school, I decided that I wanted to do something in science. And from then on, I had the opportunity to have good teachers, my family who encouraged me. And I wanted to first be something like dealing with biology. I didn't know exactly what it was, but it was exciting to learn and to experience and to be curious about things. So I had that little inspiration and that little spark of curiosity early, and I just follow what I thought I wanted to do in life. My mom always said to me, "Do what you feel in your heart and do what is your passion." So that's what I did.
Awesome. So, as a follow up, how did you decide to study the relationship between wild and domesticated crops such as squash and pumpkin?
Well, that's a very interesting story. When I finished my doctorate degree, my specialty at the moment was molecular biology and evolution. I was using DNA tools and techniques to be able to study diversity at different levels. And I had the opportunity to apply for this postdoctoral fellow with Dr. Dolores Piperno, who is also a colleague and an emeritus scientist at STRI. And she's still doing such an amazing job and in trying to understand origins of agriculture and center of domestication for domesticated plants. And one of the projects she was working at the moment was exactly how many times were cucurbits domesticated in the Americas. So I joined her team, and she had a team with other colleagues and other scientists doing um, different techniques, but she needed someone who did molecular work. So I applied for the position or the postdoctoral, and I got it, and I started working in this exciting project, which at the end led to a couple of very good papers and also a lifetime relationship with Dolores, who is also has been also a great mentor throughout my career.
Wonderful. Um, the next question is, what drew you to use molecular tools in your research?
Well, that is something that I was inspired when I was doing my bachelor degrees in biology at University of Panama. I was always liking things that needed to do with genetics. And back in those days, we're actually talking early 90s. The the technology was starting to ramp up about the use of those techniques to understand diversity or to use DNA more widely to be able to discover and unravel the secrets of life in a way. So I decided when I finished my bachelor's that I wanted to do something related to genetics and associated to DNA. When I got into grad school and to Rutgers University, I found this opportunity to work with Dr. Robert Bryan. He was working on fish. And the question that I had asked there is, what is the relationship between some species of fish? And the way to go about that was to use genetic work, DNA work, and then using, as I always say, molecular biology is like a toolbox. It actually has different techniques that allow you to answer for different questions. So I became someone who was acquainted with those tools and was using those tools to exactly study diversity at the different level, the species level, the genus level, sometimes at a broader level. So to me, that's always been my passion, trying to understand how things work at the very the molecular level. That is how excited I got to learn these techniques. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much for that. The next question from our viewers is, did you ever face discouragement when you were young, when you started becoming interested in pursuing science as a career?
Oh yes, I did. It's funny because I told to my family and some other people, like, I want to do biology, I want to go to university and study science. Um, some member of my family, actually not my immediate family because my immediate family was very supportive, but some other members and some friends said, biology, you're not going to make any money there. You're just going to die because it's like no money there. It's like science. Who does that? Why don't you do like become a lawyer and you're going to business? And I'm thinking like that. I'm not attracted to that. I don't like that. That's not what I feel passion for. So I did actually go when I remember going to my mom and say, Mom, people are saying that I shouldn't do this. So she started with me and said, Oris, you need to do what you feel you are gonna good at it. If you are gonna be happy in life, do what you like and what you feel passionate for. And that was actually how I decided not to listen and to hear to other comments about what I should or should not do, and decided to do what I felt it was good for me.
Perfect. So our next question, again from our audience, what qualities did you look for in a mentor, and how did you ask that person to be your mentor?
Well, as I said earlier, mentors are very important. The qualities that I look and I also try to offer in a mentor is someone who listens and someone who's able to speak to you with the truth, but with kindness as well. There are times the purpose of a mentor is not someone who can tell you all the good things. It's someone who can guide you, who can see the big picture and provide you with opportunities or options as you face challenge in your life. So to me, a good mentor is someone who I can feel I have the confidence to talk to, I'm comfortable speaking to, I can be open with someone who's not going to judge me. So not being judgmental is very important. And very important also is someone who could provide good advice for others as well. Someone is actually very genuine and authentic. And how do I look for a mentor? Usually comes by first of all, sort of talking to the person. If you identify someone who you think could be a good mentor, reaching out and having initial conversations and see if you actually find that rapport, that connection. And then after that, asking the person, would you be my mentor? And that's how much I did it in many of the occasions. I went and had the opportunity to meet with the person, interact with the person, share some ideas. And then if I felt we were connected, then I will ask that person more formally to say, would you be willing to be my mentor?
Fantastic. And another one from our audience. How does your identity as a Panamanian woman inform how you lead STRI? What do you feel you bring to the role that other directors maybe didn't?
Well, a couple of ideas on that. Being a Panamanian on a position of leadership at this STRI has been very interesting. Actually speaks to the institution. And I do want to say that when I was asked to take this interim role as an acting director, it was because of the recognition of my qualifications. I've been as an institution for 30 years, and I'm very honored to be serving in this position. And it's also, as I said, as a recognition of all the qualifications, the trajectory, and the knowledge that I can contribute. What do I bring? I think a different perspective. One of the things that we learn is that women see different and have different perspectives in leadership. We have a different way of perceiving and addressing issues. So I truly believe that I bring diversity and a different way of doing things and addressing things. It's just different of probably what traditional has been done. But at the same time, it's a contribution. I think it adds to the wealth of the knowledge that we have at the tradition that we have here, STRI in Panama. We have to remind us that STRI, located in Panama, we're very grateful to Panama and its people because of the openness of being here for 100 years and continue to do so and thriving in doing great, excellent work in biology in the tropics.
Fantastic. Institutionally, the Smithsonian supports both scientific research and science communications. Has that dual approach impacted the way you think of your work as a researcher? And do you see this dual focus as important?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mentioned that during my path as a scientist, one of the things that I found was critical is to be a good communicator. And I wasn't. I have to say that it was not when I finished my PhD, I had issues and I struggled to communicate what I did, because it came too technically, it wasn't inspiring. It was like, I remember the first time I talked to a non-scientific audience, it was not a good talk, I have to say, because I couldn't find the right word. So just by seeing the body language of the people who was in the audience, I said, this is not working. So after that, I made an effort and say, good communication starts not only with those who deliver the message, but also how the message is delivered and how those who receive the message take that message. So I started taking courses and listening and tuning in, and who were good communicators, what were the techniques that we're using. And little by little, I started to learn more and make an effort, because that did actually make a difference in my career, being able to communicate what I did as a scientist. And later on, in my position as Associate Director for Science Administration, that became a critical tool and skill, because I needed to be in the interface between the scientists, being able to communicate the value of what they did to those who had to act upon that, or to the decision makers. I wouldn't say that I'm actually a top-notch communicator now, but I come a long way since the first time I did that first talk a few years ago.
Oh, wonderful. I think this is going to be our last question, just sort of based on time, but have you ever suffered from imposter syndrome? If so, what techniques do you use to conquer that fear in order to keep going?
Yes, imposter syndrome is actually very common, especially when you're in the path of growing, and starts with something as simple. And it's an exercise that I always recommend the people I mentor, is like, take your CV and put all the things that you do. And I did that myself. And at the beginning, it's like, I couldn't find things that I'd done, because what I'm doing, it's like, it's a given. It's not, I couldn't recognize the value of some of the things that I was doing. And it's not a matter of actually being an egocentric or adding to your ego. It's a matter of recognizing what you do and what you do well, in a very kind and open manner. And so the way I had overcome, because there were times it's like, maybe I shouldn't be here, or it's not the right position for me, or I'm not going to be accepted, so maybe it's not me. I took a step back and say, Oris, where are you right now? Where do you need to go? And what is it that you want to communicate or show? And if you do it with truth and your kindness, and you actually be true to yourself, it comes out the right way. So I did it by talking to me and trying to find the confidence, and also trying to find that confidence in those who were around me, the people who mentored me, my friends and my family. They help a lot in becoming a better person, a better scientist, and also trying to fight that imposter syndrome.
Fantastic. I know I, like many of us, probably feel the same way about imposter syndrome, so that was a great answer. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to be with us this afternoon. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Our next session is First Ladies of Cultural Heritage, featuring Shannon Brogdon Grantham, photograph and paper conservator at the Smithsonian Museum Conservation Institute, Marian Kamenetz, head of conservation at the Smithsonian National Museum of the American Indian, Amber Kerr, chief of conservation and senior paintings conservator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum, Jane Klinger, museum curator and senior research conservator at the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum, and Dr. Joyce Stoner, the Edward F. and Elizabeth Goodman Rosenberg Professor of Material Culture and director of the Preservation Studies doctoral program at the University of Delaware. Dr. Stoner, over to you.
Good afternoon. We are delighted, we five, to be part of this American Women of Science Symposium. My name is Joyce Stoner, and I've taught for the University of Delaware Winter Tour Program in Art Conservation for 44 years. Whether we are asked to care for Rembrandt paintings or fossil bones, we think of conservation of cultural heritage as a three-legged stool. The history and meaning of the works, scientific understanding of the materials, and the hand skills needed to restore, repair, or make sympathetic enclosures to protect the works. Restoration has been going on since Greek and Roman times and was usually carried out by artists. But in the 19th century, scientists and historians became involved. Today, we'll look at 8 of the first ladies of conservation cultural heritage. Some are the first women to lead an initiative, and some are the first people of any gender to lead an initiative. Mrs. Mary Philadelphia Merrifield was the first technical art historian. She was active in the field in the middle of the 19th century. Men ran the museums, art academies, and libraries. But Mrs. Merrifield managed to travel all through Europe, read and translate manuscripts, and by 1849 had published more than 30 ancient manuscripts about paint, varnish, frescoes, miniature painting, glass, leather, dyeing, oils, and much, much more. In Europe, women were allowed to visit the libraries only on certain days, and monastery libraries were never open to women at all, but she persevered. She backed up and tested what she found in the manuscripts, exactly as we do today, by studying the physical, chemical, and optical characteristics of the actual pigments. Mrs. Merrifield's translated manuscripts have not been equaled and are still in use today. She next turned to botanical study and illustration and put her hand skills to work, as you see here. This is her watercolor. Our Mrs. Merrifield was a walking three-legged stool. The first museum scientific laboratories were established in 1888 in Berlin, at the British Museum in 1920, and at the Fogg Art Museum at Harvard in the late 1920s. Rutherford John Gettins was the first museum chemist. Here you see him at work near Anne Clapp, a pioneer painting conservator at the Fogg, and then a pioneer paper conservator. We learn from the Fogg records that Mr. Gettins had 3 female research assistants: Margaret Binion, who studied pigments, Elizabeth Bigelow, who looked at coatings, and Marie Farnsworth, who studied both pigments and Egyptian glass. Madeleine Orr was the first female head of a museum science laboratory at the Louvre. She had started at the research laboratories of France when she was just 24. And here on the left, you can see her as part of the group that's founded our International Institute for Conservation. She published radiographs and imaging and analysis of old master paintings. She was a pioneer in that. And she was a famous personage of the French art world. When President Kennedy met her on a visit, of course, he would be introduced to the First Lady of French science in the museum. At a podium at an IIC meeting in Paris that I attended, Madame Orr said, "I suppose I am now a monument." Her publications in the 1950s and 60s were some of the few resources available as I entered conservation study at NYU. She published a memoir in 1987 that discussed interactions of art and science and the realities of being a woman in a very sexist universe. We have an international abstracting journal, Art and Archaeology Technical Abstracts, known as AATA, published now by the Getty for the International Institute. In the upper left of each slide in a red box, the number of publications by these 8 first women that have been abstracted in our International Abstracting Journal will appear. At the age of 22, Joyce Plesters was appointed as research chemist at the National Gallery, London. She soon had an international reputation for the analysis of tiny pinpoint-sized cross-sections of paint from old master paintings. She consulted throughout Europe and the US, and here you see her teaching at NYU, the first program in the US for conservation, and this is Ron Cunningham, who went on to work at the Smithsonian. Joyce's amazing article was for at least 4 decades, the most cited article in all of the conservation literature. And this was working on paint cross sections. And you can see here that she starts out with a tiny sample that is only as big as the period in 12-point type. And then looking through the microscope, she can see the ground, the different layers of paint, and the most expensive blue is ultramarine. It's even more expensive than gold. She especially loved paintings by Tintoretto, who used a great deal of ultramarine. And despite all of this accomplishment, when she had her interview, they said they were disappointed that she wasn't a young man. We have interviewed 5 of the 8 first ladies that we're talking about today for our FAIC, American Institute for Conservation Foundation, oral history file. And we started out, you can see, with little recording devices which have evolved into Zoom. We've done quite a few this year with Zoom. And we've gone from manual typewriters to beautiful cold storage. And there are now over 450 transcripts available digitally to consult. Elizabeth West Fitzhugh was the first female cultural heritage scientist at the Smithsonian, hired at the Freer in 1955. In 1956, she was telling the Washington Post about the copper content of a Chinese bronze. Her subsequent activities included studying Islamic manuscripts, photographing and analyzing Chinese jade with X-ray diffraction, or taking careful notes on the hydration of gypsum. And today at the Freer, you can still see her wonderful handwriting and her notes on all these different topics. This spectrograph was in the basement when I was studying at the NYU Conservation Center. Looked to me like a grand piano. And here's a glass spectrographic plate from this spectrograph that I've used as the background for this PowerPoint. Here is Liz explaining the operation of the spectrograph to the faculty at NYU. And here's just a glimmer of what she contributed to our field. She was head of so many different organizations and an editor, and a record 770 of her articles were published in Art and Archaeology Technical Abstracts as an abstract. Jacqueline Olin was the first scientist at the new Smithsonian Scientific Research Center that involved into the Conservation Analytical Lab, or CAL. As she described in her oral history interview, CAL was first housed in the basement of the National Museum of Natural History, along with mosquito specimens. CAL then moved to what became known as the National Museum of American History and moved to Suitland, Maryland in 1983 and became the MCI, or Museum Conservation Institute. You can see on the screen her wide list of research topics. In the 21st century, Jackie Olin has been much involved with the Finland Map studies, what the American Chemical Society in 2004 called an inky controversy. This 15th century map was rediscovered in 1957 and later called a fraud due to the presence of the anatase form of titanium dioxide, considered a 20th century pigment. However, Jackie argued and continues to argue that after her in-depth studies of iron gall ink and its history, and her analysis of the ink using microchromatography and transmission electron microscopy, the map should not be considered to be a forgery. She fought incomplete scholarship by others regarding medieval ink making, which did involve anatase. She noted in her 2013 interview that the guys that Thomas Hoving would call fake busters in his book, are still not convinced. Heather Lachman is the first and only cultural heritage scientist to receive a MacArthur Award. She went from Vassar to NYU to MIT, and in 1977 became the director for the Center for Materials Research in Archaeology and Ethnology, a consortium of 8 Boston institutions. In her 2014 oral history, Heather said she heard a talk at Vassar about taking tiny core samples with a hypodermic needle from the Ghent altarpiece. She was thrilled by this, and at that moment, she realized cultural heritage science would be her career. She won a MacArthur grant in 1984 and has spent over 30 years investigating the technology used by Andean people. Martha Goodway is the first ever metallurgist to be hired by a museum. According to the MIT Alumni magazine in 1957, she was one of only 19 women to graduate from MIT and was featured on the front page of the Boston Globe. She worked for 4 decades at the Smithsonian's Museum Conservation Institute, where she researched metalwork from around the world and worked with materials ranging from early Bronze Age tin to the famous 1903 Wright Brothers flyer. Carolyn Rose was the founder of the modern, more scientific approach to anthropological and ethnographic conservation. She created her own field of special study, combining archaeology, art history, conservation science, chemistry, anthropology, and museum studies. She established the George Washington University Museum Studies program in association with the National Museum of Natural History and brought in Smithsonian scientists, including archaeologists, chemists, metallurgists, and ethnologists. The president of GW awarded her the President's Medal and described her as a one-woman graduate school, a reference to the fact that she had taught or impacted the lives of so many ethnographic and archaeological conservators. She taught and lectured in 22 countries and served as president or chairman of many professional institutes, as you see on the screen. She received multiple awards, including a Medal of Honor presented by the Duke of Calabria in Madrid. Sadly, after this remarkable 30-year career, she died of cancer at the age of only 53. The 2005 issue of the Journal of the American Institute for Conservation became a festschrift in the honor of Carolyn Rose and her 30-year career. This is the first and to date only example of a dedicated journal issue festschrift in the history of the American Institute for Conservation. Women have been a powerful and inspirational force in interdisciplinary cultural heritage conservation. Starting the count with our Elizabeth Fitzhugh, over the last 35 years, 7 of the 13 presidents of the AIC have been women. When I graduated from the NYU Conservation Center in the early 1970s, all of the directors of the North American Conservation graduate programs were male. However, by 1984, I was the one female program director, and 2 decades later, there was only one male program director. We think that may be the trend for the future. But for more discussion of the future, I turn the Zoom mic over to Amber Kerr of the Smithsonian American Art Museum Lunder Center and her panel of other distinguished and current First Ladies of Cultural Heritage in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Thank you, Joyce, for that introduction. And I am really honored to be here today with the panelists that are going to join us in a conversation about where we are in science today and where we're headed. First, I'd like to introduce Shannon Brogdon Grantham. Shannon is the photograph and paper conservator at the Smithsonian's Museum Conservation Institute, known as MCI. Shannon's primary duties include collection-based conservation research, innovative treatment, and preventive care of photographic and paper-based collections across the Smithsonian Institution. An area of conservation close to her heart is teaching and mentoring, and Shannon has been involved in numerous programs to promote equality and inclusion in the field. Next is Jane Klinger, who previously served as chief conservator for the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. Jane is currently in a new position there as museum curator and senior research conservator. The focus of her research is on the identification and preservation of the material culture related to trauma. And then we have Marian Kamenetz, who became the first head of conservation at the National Museum of the American Indian in 1991. She served as the coordinator for the ethnographic working group of ICOM-CC, and her primary interests include Indigenous representation in the preservation of cultural materials, the training of conservation fellows and interns, conservation partnerships with Native communities and artists, and diversification of the conservation profession. As I mentioned, my name is Amber Kerr, and I am the Chief of Conservation and Senior Paintings Conservator at the Smithsonian American Art Museum's Lunder Conservation Center. This is a facility with floor-to-ceiling glass walls that allows our visitors to view the conservation treatment of artworks in the collections of the National Portrait Gallery and the American Art Museum. And this facility also provides public programming and outreach initiatives to raise awareness to the conservation and preservation of all forms of cultural heritage. Most recently, we hosted an international symposium on sustainability titled Stemming the Tides, Global Strategies for Sustaining Cultural Heritage Through Climate Change, a program we coordinated with the Smithsonian's National Collection Program. So now, ladies, let's join in a few questions in our panel. Well, thank you, ladies, again. So the first question I'd like to pose to each of you is that science is an important part of what we do. And so understanding how science relates to climate heritage and conservation, I'd like to ask each of you how it sort of relates to your particular collection. And I'd like to begin with you, Jane Klinger. You have a historic collection that is very important to understand and authenticate. Can you speak to how science helps you with that?
Well, first of all, we're dealing with collection items that primarily were produced during a time of conflict when the usual commercial routes were interrupted. Also, many of our objects were made by people in the ghettos and in the labor and concentration camps. So materials were not readily available and were basically scrounged. There are stories about people only writing diaries who only had a bottle of ink. They wanted to make it last, would add things to it. And before we can develop effective conservation treatment protocols, we need to know exactly what we have in our hands in order to do no harm. So we're using all of the analytical techniques we have available to us, visual as well as where we can, taking samples, but we prefer to rely on non-invasive, non-destructive techniques.
Okay, and Marian, you have a collection that has, from Native communities, a lot of ethnographic material and ephemeral material to it. So what do you aim at, and how do you use science in caring for your collections?
Well, thank you for that question, Amber. A couple of ways that we use science are to verify or identify materials. For example, we may have material listed that the item really isn't made of because of someone's assumption that that's what it was. And so we can look at the material more closely, examine it, take a sample perhaps, and identify it under the microscope, and then come up with the correct answer of what that item is made from. We also use portable X-ray fluorescence to analyze heavy metal residues on items because they may have had pesticides applied to them post-collection that include chemicals such as arsenic, mercury, and lead. And so oftentimes we're using a portable X-ray fluorescence instrument to look at the surfaces of some of our collections to see if there are these residues on them. However, in addition to our scientific analysis and tools, what's really important is also the context, the cultural context of where our collections came from. And so I would say that that amount of background information that we get from our curators or literature or our collaborators from the community is just as important as being able to know what a material is, because it gives us the context from which we then can derive an appropriate treatment and examination.
Excellent. Well, and Shannon, you work at a very unique facility within the Smithsonian, the Museum Conservation Institute, which I mentioned is called MCI. And you work not only with fellow conservators, but also with conservation scientists. Can you speak a little bit about the team of which you work with, and also how conservation science applies to what you do as a paper and photographic conservator?
Absolutely, Amber. Thank you for that question. So at MCI, we are really a unique research facility within the Smithsonian. We are not a museum in the sense that we don't have a collection. So we don't, have works of art that we're putting on display, but we function as a resource to the entire institution in that we are able to perform conservation treatments, do conservation research, and also do what we call open lab, which is where a unit can bring in a sample or material that they're interested in, figuring out what it's made out of, and or having analysis done on it kind of quickly, and they can bring it to us at MCI, and our conservation scientists, can do the analysis there on the spot. And of course, the great thing about that is we have such a wealth of expertise right in one building. So including myself, we have, and I work on photographs and paper, we have a paintings conservator, we have an objects conservator, we have more of a research paintings conservator as well, textile conservation, and we have preventive conservation. So we're able to cover every material you could imagine. And then with our scientists, we have, physical scientists who have been working in their respective fields for decades. So you have all of this expertise in one location. And I think for me, I collaborate routinely with the scientists to work on a vast variety of materials. Recently, I've been working on a project that I would say is kind of unique in the sense that it's an unusual photographic material, photographs on textiles. So this is something that there's not a lot about it in the literature, and it's a group of materials from the Anacostia Community Museum, and we have been trying to help them figure out what they are and then how to preserve them because they're so unusual. So that's the type of project that involves not only the museum staff, but also working very closely with scientists to do analysis like X-ray fluorescence, or even in the instance where we are able to take a small sample, doing something like FTIR on a very small sample that we're able to take.
Well, I can say from a collecting unit perspective, I've been very appreciative of the collaboration that we get to do with MCI in helping us to identify materials as well in my own collection, and also for the amazing research that you're able to do with our interns and fellows to help them as they advance their careers and understand how things are made and how to care for them. So my next question it reflects on what Joyce mentioned, that conservation is also referred to as a three-legged stool, and that to be a good conservator, you need to have strengths in three fields. That is science, as we're addressing today, art history, and also the studio arts. But we're not alone in that. Not only do we need to be strong in those three fields, but we need to collaborate closely with people who represent the artwork from those three perspectives. So what I'd like to do is to begin with you, Marian, as you work with Native communities and cultures. Tell us who it is that you basically collaborate with when you're working on these collections and preserving them for future generations.
Thank you, Amber. So just to extend the leg a little bit in its definition of art history, I would have to say that I would make that more cultural heritage preservation, and the people who are involved with that are our collaborators from the communities, such as Native artists or community representatives who understand the cultural appropriateness of what it is that we are stewards for at the National Museum of the American Indian. And I would like to say that we do consider ourselves stewards of the collection and not the owners of the collection, which are culturally, in our way of looking at it, owned by the community. So it's our honor to be able to help preserve them, and to do that in a responsible way, involving the community in order to know how things should be best stored, where they should be stored, what they shouldn't be stored with. how they should be conserved, whether we're the appropriate people to be handling them, whether the item might be gender restricted. Is it a female handle only item or a male handle only item? And how to appropriately address what needs to be done to something in our care. And sometimes the answer is don't do anything to it because it needs to be allowed to continue on its path. Most of our collections are viewed by Native people as living items rather than a static object. These are beings in the collection. And so as that, it has its own life and history that it needs to not be encumbered by inappropriate preservation sometimes. So we have to consider that as well.
Yes, the importance of getting those voices involved and those communities involved is so important in our field. And in a few minutes that we have left, I actually want to address diversity in our field. And Shannon, I know that this is a particular passion and focus for you as it is for all of us. Can you speak a little bit about the work and how we can reach out more to communities and to diversify our field better?
Absolutely. So one area that I, as you've mentioned, Amber, been very close to my heart is diversity and equity and inclusion in our field. And a lot of the things that we're doing now, especially with the ability to do more of this kind of digital outreach, are reaching out to students who are in like K through 12, as well as college age students. I think the biggest thing for me is to kind of capture the student when they're able to really take in something like art conservation as a potential career path, or even think about it as just another alternative to what you can do in museums or what you can see when you go and visit museums. And so something that I am very passionate about is doing that outreach and either doing something where it's complementing the curriculum that they're already learning in school, if they're in K through 12, or if they're in undergrad or even a graduate student. The projects that we work on with these individuals are kind of centered around something that will help them grow and develop in their professional track.
Excellent. Now, Jane, in keeping in mind with communities and engagement and diversity, can you speak to your collection and the importance of the historical context and reaching out to the communities that you work with? And that we only have a few moments left, but your voice is very important in this regard.
Well, I say for us, it's really carrying forth the lessons of the Holocaust and the message that the Jewish populations may have been the primary targets, but they were not the only target. There's the Roma, the Sinti, the African peoples who had migrated to Europe, populations, members of the population that were called Mischling, they too were targeted. And so part of our effort is to get that message across, that when we look at the beginnings of the rise of Nazi power, elements in the social context that were beginning to fray due to economic difficulties, educational difficulties, fears and prejudices that were being fomented. So I'm constantly, in a sense, arguing with the idea that the Holocaust Memorial Museum only memorializes the Jewish population. In fact, we're putting together an exhibition on the Rohingya and what has been happening with them. We have addressed what has gone on in Sudan, what went on in Cambodia. All of this we're concerned with in order to carry the lessons forward and work with the potentialities for genocide. In fact, we have a department, a division that is called the Committee for the Prevention of Genocide, that give first alerts to what is going on in the world.
Well, thank you. And ladies, it's amazing how quickly time passes. We could go on all day on a number of topics, but I really do appreciate your coming here today and talking with me about these key topics and for participating in this. And we certainly thanks the committee for choosing not only the First Ladies in Conservation to have Joyce talk about some of the founding women in conservation science, but also my esteemed colleagues here today and joining me in this conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Amber. Wasn't that glimpse into the world of conservation of cultural heritage just fantastic? Next up, we'll have a panel titled Affinity Groups as Grassroots Agents of Change, moderated by Christina Borst, lead technician at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, Dr. Brenda Maria Soler Figueroa, research technician at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, Vanessa Liz Gonzalez, computational genomics scientist at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History, and Brianna Pobener, paleoanthropologist at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. Christina?
Welcome to this afternoon's panel on Smithsonian Affinity Groups as Grassroots Agents for Change. To get into a little background, affinity groups are a collection of coworkers that gather and share a similar purpose, identity, or interest. These groups can be formed at the institution level, at local or national levels, and they provide members with a space for support, professional development resources, or mentorship opportunities, while also providing employers increased employee retention, morale, and diversity. Typically, these groups start as grassroots efforts with a need to build networking opportunities within the organization and to bring about workplace change. Historically, we find affinity groups focus on race and ethnicity, gender, and sexual identity. However, we are increasingly seeing affinity groups formed over shared identities around age, veteran status, family structure, or ability. Today, we welcome 3 panelists across the Smithsonian Institution who are a part of 3 different affinity groups. I'll start by introducing Dr. Brenda Soler Figueroa, who is a marine biologist studying plankton in ship ballast water for the Marine Invasions Lab at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. She has been a part of the Women in Science group at CERC for the past 3 years. Dr. Brianna Pobener is a paleoanthropologist who researches the evolution of human diet and is a lead human origins program education specialist at the National Museum of Natural History. She holds leadership positions for the family-friendly workplace community and on the Senate of Scientists. Lastly, Dr. Vanessa Gonzalez is a computational genomics scientist studying how species are related across the tree of life as part of the National Museum of Natural History's Global Genome Initiative. She's an active member of the Smithsonian Pride Alliance. Welcome, panelists. To begin, I'd love to get more background about each of the groups you are a part of, as well as the primary audience for your group and what goals your groups have as agents of change. Vanessa, can you start us off?
Hi, as Christina mentioned, I am part of the Smithsonian Pride Alliance. And this organization or affinity group was formed over 30 years ago as an outcrop of, in the 80s, the AIDS movement, AIDS crisis, I believe. And the purpose of the Smithsonian Pride Alliance, or the collective vision, is to ensure adequate and appropriate representation of the LGBTQ+ employees in Smithsonian policies and programs. From the beginning, the SI Pride Alliance has been running its affinity group with the broader interests of human rights and equity as approaches for management and scholarship. And sort of the audience for the SI Pride Alliance is LGBTQ+ employees of the Smithsonian, and the mission, specifically the Pride Alliance, is to provide support for those staff. And throughout those 30 years of its running, the SI Pride Alliance has expanded its mission to ensure recognition and inclusion of LGBTQ plus folks in exhibits, programming, and the Smithsonian strategic vision.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Brenda?
Yeah, hi. I'm part of the CERC Woman in Science group, and our primary audience are all those people who identify as women, and that include senior scientists, research staff, technicians, the education staff, interns, and administrators. And our mission is to empower individuals, foster career growth, celebrate all types of experiences and diversity, and also to provide mutual support for all women and non-binary people at CERC to create a more equitable and inclusive workplace. We also advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion issues and family-friendly policies. And what I most value about the group is that it has this camaraderie space where I feel supported. The group is very welcoming. And I really feel that I belong to the CERC community thanks to this group. I also see the group as a space where we learn and grow together and also drive positive changes within the organization, which I think is crucial.
Thanks, Brenda. Brianna?
Yeah, hi. So I am one of the coordinators of the family-friendly workplace community at the National Museum of Natural History. And this community was actually initially formed as a committee of the Senate of Scientists in February 2018. But even at that formation, it was broader than just the science community because a few of the coordinators are started from outside the science community at Natural History. And it really started as a space to provide working parents and caregivers a safe space to talk about work-life balance and the joys and challenges of family life. It exists as an advisory group to the museum senior leadership and advocates for a family-friendly environment for the entire museum community in recognition that a supportive workplace culture improves retention of staff members who are raising families and can lead to higher productivity on the job. The mission of the family-friendly workplace community is to foster a family-friendly environment at the National Museum of Natural History and to advocate for improvements to staff resources at the museum, while also working to improve both the organization and access of relevant Smithsonian policy information on our internal intranet site. So we use listservs and other technologies to announce Smithsonian-sponsored social events. Well, that was more pre-COVID, to organize informal gatherings and to basically facilitate communications among parents and caregivers at the museum. And it really began as an informal, as a series of informal gatherings among a community of parents meeting over lunches. And we have done things like consult on the new dedicated lactation spaces, both for visitors and for staff. We've drafted a new resource for expectant parents and primary caregivers, and established a listserv at NMNH to share all the information about family-related events and general communication. We've also collaborated with related working groups in other parts of the Smithsonian. And to me, I think the greatest value has been, as Brenda said, really the camaraderie and the ability to build community in ways that are more informal that we often don't get a chance to do, during our kind of formal workplace lives.
Thanks for that. And I'm really glad you brought up COVID because it has brought a definite need for adjustment, both in our work lives as well as our home lives. And so I was wondering if you could expand more about the challenges you and members of the family-friendly workplace community faced under the changes brought by the COVID pandemic and how that affinity group helped maybe develop solutions to those problems.
Yeah, that's a great question. So certainly I think parents and caregivers have really additional challenges during COVID. Those of us who have, kids at home that we're caring for who aren't going to school, who maybe are going to school or daycare, but we have health concerns. We have new models for work-life balance and being able to try to work with the people who we're caring for in our homes. So two things that the family-friendly workplace community did is that we created a Microsoft Teams group to enable us to just communicate asynchronously with each other, share information, answer questions about everything from like, does anybody know a good, ecologically friendly mosquito repellent for my kids this summer to, what was that Smithsonian-wide email about new family leave policies? And so a way to share information, both kind of official information, but a lot of unofficial kind of community building information. And then a few months ago, we also started having 2 informal Zoom chats a month, one in the morning and one in the afternoon, which are drop in. They have no agenda, and they are simply kind of a place for us to meet up, exchange information, ask questions. And they've been, again, just that valuable community building space for those of us, kids and pets are all welcome in these informal meetings. And so I think it's also enabled us to just share our stress and anxiety and make sure that, all of the working parents and caregivers are kind of up to date on what options are out there for support for us.
Yeah, I definitely think it's been very important in these times to have communities you can talk to about the challenges you're facing. And I can see a need for parents to get together every once in a while and share resources and talk about the best way to handle pandemic life stress. And that gets at a great question. These affinity groups build communities through their members and that shared identity. But oftentimes there are allies to those affinity groups who want to participate or help or may not be aware of the issues faced by those groups, but if they did know, would want to help enforce policy change and build a stronger community. Brenda, being a part of the Women in Science group, how do you see the role of affinity groups for creating that space for women and non-binary scientists to get together to chat, as well as spaces for convening allies who want to be involved and want to help with workplace challenges and changes?
Yeah, great question. I believe that both roles are very important. Affinity groups should provide a safe space to have important and sometimes difficult conversations about the issues at hand. Let's say, for example, how to create a more inclusive workplace. However, after having those conversations within the group, sometimes it is important to search for allies who advocate for the group, support your ideas, and also help to make changes happen. And you can find allies in affinity groups similar to yours outside your organization or even between the administrators of your organization. And for example, one of the achievements of the CERC Woman in Science group was the creation of a lactation room. And that was possible thanks to all the help and support that we received from one of our administrators, Bob Gallagher, who sadly is not between us anymore.
Yeah, I know Bob did a lot to help the Women in Science group at CERC, and we rely on allies with affinity groups to help make change possible. Thank you. That was a great response. Vanessa, I have a question for you next. This conference focuses a lot about women in science, but to be frank, a lot of the progress made and a lot of the benefits have served traditionally white cis women in the workplace. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how affinity groups can make more space for values and issues, specifically those that impact underrepresented groups. whether that's based on racial identity, gender identity, or ability?
It's a really great question. But first, I want to stress that I'm not a member of the leadership team of the SI Pride Alliance, so my answers and opinions are of my own and do not necessarily reflect the SI Pride Alliance stance on any of these topics, but I can answer as a member of the group as well as a woman in science. And I do identify as a woman. I use she, her, hers pronouns. But to answer that question more specifically, I want to echo that, affinity groups are extremely important for building that camaraderie that has already been mentioned by Brenda and Brianna. And that camaraderie is essential and important to sort of maintaining work culture. As far as, including more groups, being more inclusive, specifically when the organizations or groups are predominantly cis and white. And this doesn't necessarily only, I think this sort of topic doesn't necessarily only reflect women in science, but sort of any other affinity group that exists. Let's talk about just the Smithsonian in our institution. So one thing that I would recommend, and I follow these practices when I'm sort of faced with difficult topics, is reaching out to those communities in which the problems are, the most affected, impactful. And in this case, really reaching out to the Black, Indigenous, people of color, trans, non-binary, gender non-conforming folks for guidance. And if those folks aren't represented in your groups, it's really imperative and urgent to figure out what existing barriers there are for inclusion of those folks. Why aren't they there? And though I recommend seeking guidance from those folks, I cannot stress enough that the onus should not be on those folks to do the work for the organization to be more inclusive. It should really be on every non-Black, Indigenous person of color, cis and white woman to dismantle those barriers and figure out, what to do, what work to do to be more inclusive.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think that's a great response. And, I love talking with each of you because we all share an interest in bringing about change in our workplace and expanding representation to groups that might not otherwise be represented. And one of the questions I love asking panelists is for the generation that's coming into science. And so I'd love to ask each of you what advice you would give for the younger generation joining the workforce to help foster the types of workplaces they want to see and they want to be a part of. And I'm going to start with Brianna for that.
Sure, that's a great question. One of the pieces of advice I always give is don't be afraid to ask questions. And if something doesn't exist out there that you think should, start it. And find the allies and the mentors who will support you in the efforts that you want to make. So I think just not being afraid of institutional culture, not being afraid of doing something differently, even though it's always been done a different way before, and not being afraid of starting something new.
Right. Yeah. Vanessa?
Similar to what Brianna said, I think that, getting started, especially in this institution and in science in general, I think being familiar with the existing policies and practices of wherever you're going to end up, and see, if there's a specific topic that is, imperative to your lifestyle, how you want to exist in the culture and the community of the organization you're joining. What existing policies and practices are there? Are there current affinity groups? If they're not, why are there not? Are there barriers to those? And I think those are specific things to consider before sort of joining an institution. And once you're there, figuring out why there is not a specific group, let's say, and what you can do to start that group if you have the capacity.
Right, all things that are important to consider when joining the workforce. Brenda?
Yeah, I'm gonna add to what they say that I will definitely suggest to create or join an existing affinity group based on their needs. And for create an affinity group, I will advise to have to clearly define what are the goals, to meet regularly, again, to search for allies and resources, to understand also what are the things that can be easily done and the things for which you need to ask for permission, and also to have a plan and maybe some strategies on how the group can drive positive changes within the organization.
Right. All great responses. Thanks, guys. Well, I want to give a big thank you to all of our panelists who joined us today. Your insight and your involvement in your affinity groups is very inspiring, and I hope we continue to see the types of changes in the workforce that are on momentum. I want to thank our organizers of this panel, Lindsay Harum and Stacey Havard, for putting it together and calling us all here today. I want to thank the watchers for tuning in. And with that, our panel's concluded. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next up is a short break. Grab some water and stretch really quick, and then come back in about 2 minutes. We'll be playing a short video in the meantime featuring Dr. Carla Dove of the National Museum of Natural History.
Roxy Laybourne was the pioneer of forensic ornithology, or using the microscopic characters of feathers to identify groups or families of birds. In 1960, there was an airplane crash in Boston Harbor, and when they pulled the engines up out of the water, they realized that there were feather remains in these aircraft engines. She started looking at the feather samples from this accident and was able to identify the feathers as belonging to European starlings, and that's what caused that crash. This opened up the field of ornithology to be able to identify birds from just bits and pieces of evidence. I think Roxy's attitude was very inspiring to other women in the field. There were no barriers. There are people all over the world now who are learning how to do this, and it all started right here at the Natural History Museum with Roxy Laybourne.
Welcome back. Our next session is celebrating cross-generation progress and perspectives of women in science at the Smithsonian, moderated by Dr. Kimberly Komatsu, conservation ecologist and senior scientist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, Dr. Denise Breitberg, marine ecologist and senior scientist emeritus at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, Dr. Emily Martin, research physical scientist at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum, and Dr. Ellen Stofan, the John and Adrienne Mars Director at the Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum. Kimberly?
Hi, everybody. I'm so excited to be here today to have a conversation with you all. So over the decades, we know that the number of women in science at the Smithsonian has been increasing, and the four of us here today are Smithsonian scientists. We're female scientists who are here to discuss our paths that brought us to the Smithsonian, the challenges that we might have faced along the way, our successes and our achievements, and then our hopes for the future for women in science, both at the Smithsonian, but also globally around the world. So we just want to start off with some quick introductions so we can get to know each other. Denise, do you want to start out and tell us a little bit about yourself and your career path?
Sure, thanks for including me. My name is Denise Breitberg, and I'm a marine ecologist and a senior scientist emerita at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. I got my bachelor's degree from Arizona State and my PhD in 1984 from UC Santa Barbara in ecology and ichthyology, the study of fishes. And so I'm 68 now, which means that including my graduate school research, I've studied marine ecosystems for over 40 years. What I really love about science, though, is the process of science, of dreaming up interesting questions and figuring out how to answer them, working with really interesting people to find solutions. I love kicking around ideas and especially getting to work with young scientists. Much of my research has focused on the effects of human activities on our coastal waters and oceans, but I've also worked on topics from jellyfish ecology to oyster restoration. I started off working on really esoteric things like sex change in fish, but I've always really wanted to do science that had some societal impact. And a lot of the work that I've done over the years has really had that tilt to it. A major area of my research has been on the causes and effects of declining oxygen in the world's estuaries and oceans. Like us, the oceans need oxygen. They need to breathe to have healthy ecosystems. So officially, I retired in 2019, a little over a year ago, which for research scientists means I don't have to write grant proposals anymore. But I'm still active in research and advisory work. And over the past year, I've worked with organizations ranging from local land trusts to the United Nations. So anyway, that's a bit about me. Ellen, what about you?
Hi, so I'm Ellen Stofan, and I got my undergraduate degree in geology from the College of William and Mary. And then I went to Brown University to get a master's and a PhD in geology. I did my PhD thesis on then Soviet data of Venus, because planetary was really my area of interest. So my dad worked for NASA, so I went to my first rocket launch when I was 4 years old. My mom was a science teacher. My sister was a lawyer, so this didn't affect her. But I actually was really always passionate about science. After I got my PhD, I went to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in California and worked on a number of NASA missions, including a mission to Venus, an instrument that flew on the shuttle twice in 1994. A technology infusion program called the New Millennium Program. Then I was on a European mission to Mars, not on it, of course, I mean, studying the data. And then on the Cassini mission to Saturn. I taught for a while at University College of London, and then I was the chief scientist of NASA from 2013 to 2016, which was really fun. I got to work on things like how are we going to send humans to Mars. And I've been at the Smithsonian now for about 3 years. I absolutely love it. I wish I had more time to do science. I still do some work on terrestrial volcanoes, especially Mount Etna and Sicily. And I'm also a member of the Dragonfly mission, which is an octocopter that's going to go to Saturn's moon Titan in 2027. So I'm still trying to be a scientist, even though I'm here in a more management position at the Smithsonian. So Emily, over to you.
Thank you so much. I don't know if I'm going to be able to talk that much about what I've been doing, but I actually got my start at a small liberal arts college called Wheaton College in Massachusetts, where I got a bachelor's of arts in physics. And it wasn't until maybe close to my senior year that I even contemplated pursuing a career in a scientific field by being a scientist. I didn't know any scientists growing up. Scientist wasn't a job that like real people had. It was like a fictional job that didn't really exist. So it wasn't until very late on that I was like, maybe I should try to be a scientist, which I guess means go and get a PhD, which is really what I did. And so I went to the University of Idaho and got my PhD in 2014. And what really kind of pushed me into it was my interest in icy satellites of the outer solar system. So essentially the moons of the gas giants. And they're the weirdest, most alien-looking surfaces that I've ever seen. And as I kind of pursued my PhD, there was this sort of resurgence of interest in these bodies because we had the realization that there may be liquid water oceans underneath their crusts or their ice shells. So Titan, of course, is an example of this. Jupiter's moon Europa, like we knew about their ocean for a while, but when the Cassini mission arrived in Saturn, all of a sudden we realized, wait a minute, maybe these things are sort of distributed across the outer solar system. And that's what really drove me into trying to pursue a career in science in the first place, once I realized it was a job that people had. And so, I really was interested in why these places look as weird as they do, which is why I became really interested in faults and fractures, because the surfaces of these moons crack and break, and that can actually tell you something about what's going on in the interiors, like whether there might be an ocean there. And so those are the kinds of things I do, sort of looking at the surface and learning about what that can tell us about the history of that body, what's going on inside, and maybe whether or not there's some potential for there to be a habitable environment there. And so I actually came to the Smithsonian, to the National Air and Space Museum in the 2012-2013 academic year. My graduate advisor was on sabbatical, and it sounded like maybe it was a good place to go and hang out for a little while and hang out with some other planetary scientists while my graduate advisor was gone. And so I came back to the Smithsonian as a postdoc fellow to continue my work. And what's been really exciting about that is, for me, I've been able to expand that work into studying our moon, which is a totally different beast. I mean, it's made out of rocks instead of ice, but it's been really exciting to kind of apply my skill set to another place so much closer to home. And so I've been really excited to be able to work on those projects. But Kim, I'd love to hear more about your path.
Thanks. And it's been so great to hear about how we've all gotten to where we are today. So I'm very similar to you, Emily, that I grew up in the suburbs. I always loved biology, but I didn't know that I could be a biologist. So I thought, if you like biology, you should be a doctor. So I went to undergrad at University of California, Irvine, and I went in thinking that I would be pre-med and go on to be a doctor. And then my first year, I took a course in ecology and evolutionary biology, and I just had so much fun learning about the environment that's around us. So I joined a research lab at UC Irvine and started doing research on grasslands in Southern California. And then I continued my love of grasslands into my PhD. So I went to Yale University and I studied how grassland communities are responding to things like climate change or nutrient pollution in the Great Plains of the US. I graduated with my PhD in 2013, and then I went on to do a postdoc at UC Berkeley. So I started studying plant bacterial interactions, and I got really into microbiology of these ecosystems. And I was fortunate that in 2017, I was given a job at the Smithsonian as a senior scientist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, where I worked with Denise for a few years before she retired. And so really my job now, I'm building on all these past research experiences, thinking about how human-caused global change is impacting the plant communities and insect and bacterial communities that are around us in grasslands and forests, as well as agricultural systems around the US. So it seems like we've all had interesting twists and paths along our careers. There's definitely similarities between some of what we've experienced, but also differences, of course. But a commonality amongst the four of us is we've all ended up at the Smithsonian, which is a well-known institution around the world. And so I'm just curious, Ellen and Denise, and maybe we'll start with Denise, if you think back to yourself as a young child or maybe a young adult, what do you think your younger self would think of yourself now as a Smithsonian scientist?
Well, I never would have really expected to wind up doing what I'm doing. I mean, I was one of these geeky kids that, had to learn the name of every insect in our backyard, and, wandered around with, book trying to identify things. But I didn't really think about a career even really originally as a research scientist. I started grad school thinking I was going to be, maybe teaching part-time and actually doing pottery part-time. And I wound up taking a class right before I started graduate school where we had to do some real research as part of it. And that's when I fell in love with research. And so I did a complete turnaround in terms of the direction that I thought that I was going to go. I guess I was stubborn or arrogant enough, I'm not sure the right word, to think, oh, I can do this. I can be successful at this. This isn't a problem. I think I didn't really think there would be as many stumbling blocks or challenges along the way. But to start off thinking I might be a part-time teacher at a junior college, and now to be, helping to facilitate discussions, at the UN about changes in the ocean related to climate change is really a leap that I had not anticipated. Ellen, what about you? You're in a very different field than I am. And changes seem to have happened so fast for you.
Yeah, and it's really interesting to me. A huge commonality in all of our stories is I think that we totally didn't envision ourselves where we are. And this is something I'm actually working on at the Air and Space Museum, because I'm a big believer in Marian Wright Edelman's saying you can't be what you can't see. And I think for all of us, like envisioning, like would I have ever envisioned that I would be director of the Air and Space Museum or the chief scientist of NASA? Women didn't do those things. People who look like me didn't do those jobs. And so I never really envisioned that. I thought I knew I wanted to be a scientist because I like picking up rocks. And then eventually I figured out, because my dad was launching these landers to Mars. And so I got to meet planetary geologists and figured out that was a thing. And I said, okay, that's what I want to do at 14. I was a little bit of a nerdy kid. But the idea that I would be in leadership positions, even after I interned at the National Air and Space Museum after my freshman year in college, again, if you had told me at that point you're going to be director of the museum someday, I would not have believed it. Women didn't do those things. And that's why I think these conversations are so important and so critical, because what we're doing is helping envision, Emily and Kim to go on to that next step. They're capable of everything. And so how do we make sure that all the women who come behind us realize that these opportunities are out there, and that people who look like them have been in these scientific fields making huge contributions? And I think that's a big part of the role of the Smithsonian, is to really highlight and tell these stories. And that's the point of the American Women's History Initiative. And so I guess, let me see. I have a question, actually. I'm curious about, for you, Emily. In my career, it was really important for me to have mentors. And I actually found my first one, Farouk Elbaz, who ran the Center for Earth and Planetary Studies at the Air and Space Museum. He was a huge mentor to me just after that summer internship, really important to me. And I think mentors, but also sponsors, people who actually put you forward, are critically important, especially for women. And Emily, I'm curious, did you have people who really influenced you, and how did that help you, and what lessons did they teach you?
Yeah, thanks, Ellen. So the idea of mentorship, mentoring other people, having mentors, wasn't part of the conversation that I was a part of when I was sort of coming up in science, at least initially. And part of that was because I hadn't contemplated this field until much later on than I think a lot of people do. But I've had some really influential people. And for me, it hasn't really kind of been in just one human. There's sort of been different humans that have really fit into different needs. I think the first example would be my undergrad advisor, Jeff Collins. And I mean, he's kind of one of the original people who was really excited about Ganymede and was really involved as a graduate student during the Galileo mission to Jupiter. And so he's the one who showed me how weird and wonderful these icy moons of the gas giants could truly be, and is the one who really encouraged me and opened some doors for me in terms of getting some research experience and really getting to understand what the field was like. But I think what was almost more important for me that I got from him was this sort of camaraderie that he has and had with all these other people in the field. And so it wasn't this big, scary, anonymous group of people who did science. It was this big, welcoming and warm community that was really tightly bound together by common experiences that they shared as actual people, not just as scientists. And so I think that was a really encouraging moment for me to understand sort of the humanity of what a scientist is. And then, you know, the first person who gave me my very first research opportunity in the summer was at Lowell Observatory, Dr. Deidre Hunter. And I originally thought I would be an astronomer, maybe, right? And of course, that internship told me that maybe I didn't want to be an astronomer, but what it gave me was some fundamental research skills that I employ on a daily basis that I wouldn't have had from any other experience. And as I've kind of moved on this journey and reflected back on sort of maybe where some of my sparks might lie, I have the realization that being a Granite Stater, we are immensely proud of Krista McAuliffe. And I don't think I recognized until, in the last 10 years, what an influence knowing her story had on me considering what I could do with my future. So I think understanding what mentors are partly requires knowing that not one person can fit the whole thing for you. Kim, what about you? Do you have have you really experienced good mentorship? Because not everybody has that opportunity or that experience.
Yeah, I think I'm definitely lucky in my life that I have seen very strong female role models and scientists around me throughout my whole career. So all three of my primary academic advisors, both as a graduate student and an undergrad and a postdoc, were all brilliant female scientists. And I've learned so much from each one of them. And I think you're totally right, Emily, that it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. So as an undergraduate, I was advised by Dr. Katie Suding, and Katie was just so brilliant, and she was doing this job that I didn't even know existed. I thought professors were there to teach classes and then go home. But it turns out there's this whole research side of things, that they're doing all these things behind the scenes. They're asking questions, they're learning new things. And she really introduced me to this idea that you can have a career in research. And she was so wildly successful at it and still is. And so I think knowing that's a possibility and seeing a female succeed in that role gave me a lot of confidence going in. And then my PhD advisor, Mindy Smith, she was so great at really showing the collaborative nature of science. She has so many different collaborators around the world. She got me involved in collaborative networks, and she really stands by her people, which I think is an important skill to have. So when you're thinking about, did you have support? Definitely Mindy was always there to support me, whatever I needed. And then my postdoc advisor, Ellen Sims, another brilliant female scientist. She's more on the evolutionary biology side. And really, by that point, I felt confident as a scientist, but Ellen showed me that you can be a great scientist and very productive, but still have a work-life balance. And that's something that I hadn't seen as much from my previous advisors. So you don't have to work the same hours as everybody else. If you need to go to the gym at noon for a lunchtime yoga session, just head out the door and do it. If you work better in the evenings, you could show up at 10 a.m. and leave the lab at 7, and that's fine. Or if you work better in the mornings, you could do the opposite. So really learning from her that there's not like a one size fits all perspective to approaching science was really helpful. So really, again, I think I'm just so lucky to have seen all these different types of leadership and really had strong female advisors the whole way. And I would say, interestingly, most of the people in the labs that I was in were all females as well. So there were very few men in the labs, coincidentally. And so there was a lot of female empowerment discussion going on in every lab that I was a part of, that we can do this and we're all in it together. We can help each other out, which has been so wonderful. So I'm actually curious about the other side of it, thinking about Ellen, what you said, or Denise. Did you see people like yourself in leadership roles or in science when you were starting out? Maybe Ellen, do you want to speak to that first?
Nope. There were exceptions, right? I had an amazing professor at Brown, Carly Peters, who was absolutely lovely and really encouraging to me. But frankly, the women were few and far between. There were no women undergraduate geology professors I had. And when I got to the Jet Propulsion Laboratory, there were very few, almost no, basically women in any leadership positions. And I was frequently the only woman in the room. And I really didn't like that. It wasn't until I'd been at JPL for about 5 years that I finally had a woman boss who I adored, and we're still really good friends. But that lack of the support system that I'm so jealous and awed to hear that you have is really hard, and it makes it harder for women, especially in some of the physical sciences and physics and astronomy and computing and engineering, where women are still really in the minority, and just having to always feel like you're having to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously is exhausting, and it's tough. And frankly, that's how I felt through the whole initial phases of my career. And so, my goal is we're leaving talent on the table if we're not bringing everyone in. And we really need to diversify the STEM fields to look more like our population. Denise, I'm curious, did you have a different experience than Kim, or were you sort of in a more male dominated, or was it a little bit different?
Not quite as male dominated as you, but not anything like Kim's experience. When I was a PhD student, there were some women around in the field. They tended to be pretty junior, but the fact that they were there made a huge difference. And in some ways, it's even though I didn't have a strong female mentors the way Kim did, some of the little kindnesses and little guidances along the way really made a big difference. You know, whether it's the woman who was the editor of the first paper I ever submitted that gave me the hint of, read the review, this is accepted, read the review comments, put it in the drawer for a week, don't even think about it, and then you can tackle it. To people that, just went out of their way to tell me they thought that I was on the right track, and that, they thought that I was doing a good job and to just keep at it. So even though there wasn't a woman in the field who was, there as the major influence, there were certainly women just before me breaking ground. But there were also some men in the field too who were very supportive of there being more women, and went out of their way to accommodate women. And probably the best example is my advisor for my PhD, Al Ebeling, who, when I had a baby partway through grad school, decided, well, we just set up a crib in the lab, no problem. You can just come on in and, keep going. Didn't flinch when I took my orals 8.5 months pregnant. Just being willing to, the men who were willing to see things, to help things change and see the changes were also important. But I think the one thing that I see very different from younger women who have had female mentors is their willingness to reach out for help and advice. I think because there were so few women, kind of at my level and above, I was always a bit worried to show any weaknesses, to reach out for help and mentorship when it actually would have been a really good thing to do. So I'm really glad to see that has changed. And Emily, you talked a lot about men in your field, I think more than Kim did. So did you also have some strong female mentors that were a big help?
I did and I didn't. And I think it's, sort of twofold. Like, I'm the youngest child in my family. I have 3 older brothers. Being in a male-dominated field is something that didn't initially strike me as a challenge. It struck me as, this is what life is already like for me. So having that perspective, I think, meant that my perception of what it was like to be a woman in this field was really delayed. I remember being kind of in the early stages of grad school, and all my friends were like, come to these women in STEM meetings. And I'm like, why? What's the point? Like, what's the problem? It took me a long time to really recognize what those inequities were really creating, the kind of environment that was creating. But I think also a lot of that was delayed because, at least in my peer group, in my sort of like little nook of icy satellite scientists, it's a very equitable space in terms of there being many more women there than you find in some other spaces. And so a lot of my female mentorship really came later on as I found my way into the field, built myself a network, and actually reached out to those people, those women in my field, and said, hey, I have a question first about your science, then about what your experience has been like as a woman in this field, partly because that's how I choose to do my networking, but also because I feel like we can sometimes play into the impostery feelings that we have of, when I meet another female scientist, my first reaction is to talk more about what it's like to be a female scientist and less about what it's like to talk about our science. And so we miss out on those opportunities to build collaborations and really build strong, scientific projects together. And so trying to find those balances. So I did, once I started to recognize who my mentors were that got me to some of these places, I started to realize what I was missing, namely female mentorship. And I really started to build that network for myself so that I do have people I can reach out to and really have some really great people who have influenced me. And I've tried really hard to sort of take that example and those lessons that I've learned for myself and really try and pass that on to the students that I work with, who I still work with. I mean, I love it when I get emails from students that I worked with either as high schoolers or undergrad students who are now like, I'm applying for this thing. Can you write me a letter? Like, I know someday I'm going to feel really, really busy and not able to do it, but it's still like the best thing ever to be able to sort of pass the baton and sort of pay it forward, at least in this capacity. So I think one of the things that I'm really interested in sort of shifting a little bit towards is this idea of failure. I've had a lot of conversations with a lot of people across sort of STEM about this idea of failure, whether it be failure in a project we're working on that just doesn't turn out the way we expect it to be, or failure in trying to go down a particular route and finding the roadblocks that you either go around or over or sort of change your course. And so, Ellen, I'm really curious, do you have any moments of, I don't always feel, nobody wants to talk about failure, right? Because it feels like such a wet blanket negative thing, but I also feel like I don't want to paint this rosy picture of like, we went to grad school and then we got postdocs and then we got jobs and like, see, it's not that hard. Do you have a story that you share? I mean, I don't want you to like share something you don't want to share, but is there a story that sort of comes to mind about a time when it just wasn't as easy as it sort of seems now?
Always, I have to say, and some of it was perceived, right? So I have 3 kids. They're now, 31, 28, and 24. So they're all grown up, but at times it just felt like, how can I keep doing this? How can I keep balancing all the parts of my life and trying to muddle through it? And now when I look back, it's like, what was I worrying about? But at the time it was really, really difficult. And you run into things like, I have a couple science projects that are still sitting in that mess back behind me, where you gather data and you're like, there's got to be a pony in here somewhere, but it's not smelling like a pony, and you're just like, where is all this data taking me? And somewhere there's a nugget in there that's going to help you make some kind of scientific leap forward, and you just can't find it. And, to me, it's that whole persistence thing, right? You have to, as a scientist, sometimes say, I know these data are going to lead me somewhere. I'm just not quite looking at them the right way. I haven't gathered the exact data I need to really get to the point I'm trying to get to, or maybe I'm asking the question in completely the wrong way. So I've had a ton of failures like that where, the lesson I've always learned is just don't give up. Just keep trying, put it aside, come back to it. And then I've had huge failures. I worked for 5 years on a mission proposal to send a boat to a sea at the North Pole of Titan. 5 years, big team. We won an initial competition at NASA, and then we lost. And the mission can't be done again until I'm really, really old because of the way Titan's orbit and inclination are. And that was hugely disappointing. I remember at the time, soon afterward, I was giving a talk at my kids' school and talking about failure and how you have to be resilient and pick yourself up and you learn from failure, and that's how the world is. And afterward, the principal came up to me and she said, so how's that working? And I said, not really well at all. I was just like, no, I'm pouting and feeling sorry for myself. And, but then like a month later, I got a call saying, do you want to interview to be chief scientist of NASA? And I'm like, well, I guess I have to stop feeling sorry for myself. But again, it's resilience, it's persistence, right? That's the story of our lives. I guess when I think about it, Kim, yeah, go ahead, Kim.
Sorry, I was just going to say, unfortunately, we're coming to the end of our conversation time already. It's been so fascinating to hear what everyone has to say, and we have such a short time to talk. So I was going to just ask if anyone has any last questions that they want to get out before we wrap up. We have a few minutes left. Denise, go for it.
Yeah, I would actually love to hear just a little bit more from you, Kim, as well as Emily, about what you have seen from previous generations of women scientists that you think can really be important to future generations in the STEM. Whether it's forming networks of colleagues, which I know has been just really important to me. I mentioned the course I took right before starting grad school. Well, I am collaborating with somebody from that class right now, to other little stories that you may not have shared yet. But sort of for you guys who are, younger than Emily or I am, where do you see the future going? I know we're just about out of time, so maybe just real quick comment from Emily and then from Kim.
Yeah, so I think I alluded to this earlier, but I've been working really hard towards sort of balancing a portion of my time that I devote to mentoring students who are sort of in that high school undergraduate phase that are really trying to figure out not only what their career path should be, but also, if they've decided to pursue a graduate career, what that might look like and how to sort of pursue that. And so it's not that I didn't have those resources when I was doing it. It's more that I now sort of understand it with a different perspective. And so trying to sort of pay that forward to young career scientists and really try and help inspire everybody, but especially inspire those people who would face additional challenges coming into the field, the kinds of things that we've all experienced. And so I'm hoping that sort of by focusing on sort of this proto-scientist kind of generation, that I can help sort of change what scientists look like in the future, because it's not about, in many cases it's about supporting early career scientists, but really it's also about sort of helping to feed that pipeline in a really effective way. And so trying to give those students the opportunity to get research experience. I mean, I came from a small liberal arts college and I was incredibly fortunate to have research experience opportunities there. But I get a lot of applications from students who were like, I'm really interested in these things, but I don't have any other outlet to try and figure out if research is something I even enjoy doing or have a knack for. And so I've been trying to use the resources we have at the Smithsonian through a really robust internship program that I think has really helped a lot of students. I have more students going into graduate programs than I ever thought I would have. And so I've been really, really excited to see them go through that process and really try and help them achieve their goals. And I've really felt fortunate that they continue to come back to me as part of their network and say, hey, I've had these conversations with my research advisor, or I've had these conversations with my committee. I'd really love to hear your opinion too. And that's really meaningful to me, but I also feel like I'm helping make a change in sort of who's being put into the pipeline and hopefully helping to change what, future generations look like. Kim, what about you? I feel like we've had similar but totally different experiences.
Yeah, and I think that is the point that I would point out to future generations coming up, is that there is no one thing that a scientist looks like. You can come from any kind of background. You could live in an urban center and still grow up to be an environmental scientist, or you could live on Earth and study Titan, right? There's any kind of pathway that you could take, and no matter where you look, you could probably find an example of a female scientist who has made it, or someone who looks like you who has made it as a scientist. So we can really broaden the diversity of science by picking out these role models that we can find. And I think science is progressing in that we are seeing much more diversity within the STEM fields, which I think is wonderful. And I really think building on those networks and also finding the people that you can work really well together with. And again, knowing they don't have to be the same as you to be able to work well with you, right? You can work really well. And oftentimes you work much better with people who are different than you, and you can generate new and exciting ideas by feeding off of each other. So I think we've got a ways to go to build diversity and inclusivity in the STEM fields, but I think we're making good progress, and I'm really excited to see where we end up. So this has been so wonderful. I wish we had another hour to keep talking to each other, but thank you all so much, Denise, Ellen, Emily, for coming and talking today. And thank you for the American Women's History Initiative for sponsoring the symposium. And I hope everyone enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks for inviting me.
Kimberly, thank you so much for moderating that great conversation. Next up is a short break. Grab some water, stretch it out, and come back in about 5 minutes. Our next video features Dr. Carr Brulhide of the National Museum of Natural History.
This is my lab, and what we do is we study bones, human bones specifically. We have materials that can be very recent in time, all the way back to about 10,000 years old. My name is Carr Brulhide, and I'm a forensic anthropologist here at the National Museum of Natural History. The bones are like a time capsule. They will preserve the evidence for as long as that bone lasts. You have to know how to read them, but once you do, you can tell a whole bunch of things that you would never think that would be revealed. This is a skeleton that was excavated due to road construction. One of the most telling features of age are the growth plates. And on this humerus, this upper arm bone, you can see that I can actually physically remove the proximal joint from the shaft of the bone. And I can do that because this area is a growth plate. And so certain bones will complete their growth at certain ages, and because we're familiar with the standards and the growth process, I know he's probably not any older than about 16 years old. And so it's really pretty exciting, the types of information that we can figure out just from the skeleton. This is an exhibit called Written in Bone, and this is really an exhibit that came out of the research that I do here at the museum. The fun part about creating this exhibit was we got to select the most interesting skeletons that we've studied from the colonial Chesapeake. These are incredible stories, and they're what we call our colonial cold cases. But we've read their skeletons, and we've come up with who they were, how they lived, and in some cases, how they died. It's the closest we can come to the people that lived back then. And no other evidence can tell us what we learned from the skeleton. This skeleton, for example, I can look at the chemistry of his bones and tell you that he's a recent immigrant to America. He came here from Europe. I can tell you that he was involved in heavy physical labor by the markers I see on his bones. I can tell you that his teeth were very poor, and that's not from necessarily eating sugar like we do today, but it's from poor enamel formation. He did not have adequate diet as a child. So you put all of these things together, and I get a very detailed picture of his life, his experience in history, and it's one that I can guarantee was never written down in any history book. You hear about John Smith, you hear about Pocahontas, but who was everybody else who came here? Everybody learns about the colonial period in school, but they don't realize that the history is actively being excavated and dug up, and we're still learning a lot about the people and how they lived and died. Most people don't realize that when they go through Written in Bone here at the museum, only a couple floors above them is our lab and the 30,000 skeletons that are here at the museum. And we're actively studying those skeletons. We're actively doing forensic casework here at the museum. When law enforcement contacts us, we work with them to establish identity and to try and figure out the cause of death and any evidence related to that. And as you can see, our lab is not like what they see on TV. in shows like Bones or CSI, where it's very high tech, very fancy. But we actually do much more interesting work, I think, and the stories that and the cases that we encounter are much more interesting. Every day, new discoveries are being made, and every day, new technologies are being developed. We never used to even attempt to get DNA from bones, even forensic cases, when I first started. And now, it's something people take for granted. An intern today, when they finish their career, they are going to know 2 or 3 times as much about the bones as we do today. That's how quickly things are changing. And we always think of it as being an advocate for that person because they are no longer able to tell their story. That's incredibly satisfying. It's a very tangible way that we feel we can contribute to society, either for the resolution of a forensic investigation, but also to get a better understanding of history and the human story in that history.
Welcome back. Our last session of today, and actually of the entire symposium, is a keynote conversation featuring Secretary Lonnie G. Bunch III, the 14th Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, and Dr. Katrina Pagenkopp Lohan, marine disease ecologist and senior scientist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. I'll turn it over to Secretary Bunch and Dr. Lohan now.
Welcome to all of our viewers. Thank you so much for joining us for the final session of this year's symposium. My name is Dr. Katrina Pagenkopp Lohan. I'm a marine disease ecologist at the Smithsonian Environmental Research Center. And it is my utmost pleasure to introduce the current Secretary of the Smithsonian Institution, Secretary Lonnie Bunch. Secretary Bunch, I want to start off by thanking you so much for taking the time to have this conversation today. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at times of challenge and controversy." I personally think this quote exemplifies your leadership during this unprecedented time of multiple crises that are coming at us from all angles. And your leadership has been so inspirational to me, and I feel confident in saying that I'm not alone in that sentiment. I'm sure your schedule is overflowing right now, so it is such an honor that you found the opportunity to participate in the American Women's History Initiative this year.
Well, it's my pleasure to join you, and thank you for those kind words. I mean, I really think that the question for the Smithsonian is really, how are we of value in good times and in times of crisis? And one of the reasons I'm so excited to join you is because how important I think the American Women's History Initiative is, how important it is to me as secretary, to me as a historian, but also to me personally. I think that these are the times when it's crucially important for people to understand their past and how the past has shaped who we are. And many of those stories of the past that are left out are about women, because I do believe you can tell so much about a country by what it remembers, but I think you can tell even more by what it forgets. And it's crucially important for us to make sure that things like this Smithsonian will help us restore women to the historical narrative. But more importantly, it'll help us all understand that these are stories not of women for women, but these are stories that shape us all, shape our identity as humans, as Americans. And so I'm very honored to be part of this symposium and to say how much I appreciate the American Women's History Initiative.
Thank you so much. Well, during the past 2 weeks of the symposium, we've heard both the amazing accomplishments and also the incredible hardships that women in science have faced across a variety of scientific disciplines. What role does the Smithsonian Institution has it taken previously, and what responsibility does it have moving forward in telling these women's stories and helping to promote and retain women scientists?
Well, you know, it is a crucially important story for me because my dad was a chemist who couldn't get hired in the late 40s and early 50s because he was black. So I understand very much both the struggle for women to get hired, to find fairness. And I think it's crucially important for us to illuminate these dark corners, tell these stories, partly to restore women to the narrative, but also to make sure that we're clear about the barriers that these women struggled with, many barriers that are still with us today. And I have to be honest, I have been so moved by the things I've discovered about women in science at the Smithsonian. I remember after I became secretary, I think my first trip was up to SAO, and to really learn about those women known as the computers, right, who were recruited in 1875, working at very low wages, very low status, but the work they did, analyzing the observatory's growing glass plate collection, measuring brightness, position, color, classifying newly observed stars and galaxies. I didn't want to leave. It was so exciting. And I was so moved because I didn't know this, and I should have. Or I've been struck like the brilliant entomologist Sophie Lutterlau. I love this story of a woman who basically worked as an elevator operator for 14 years, studying insects during her lunch, and then able to finally formally join the museum's scientific and curatorial staff in insect identification. Just those stories alone tell me there are hundreds of stories in the Smithsonian that we need to explore, and then thousands more around the country that'll help us better understand this history. But what is important to me is to use this history to understand the challenges that we still face today. I think in some ways the Smithsonian has made major strides in terms of who we hire, but I also believe that we have so many barriers that still stand in the way of hiring, of women rising to leadership ranks. And then ultimately, what I hope we do is use these stories, use these histories to point us towards where we once were, but to remind us where we should be as a nation. And so these are stories that help us remember how important fairness is, how important the challenges have always been, but how important it is for an institution like the Smithsonian to do whatever it can to affect change and to help find a freer and fairer America.
Yeah, those female computers, as someone who can't even do math in my head, basic addition is very difficult for me. So I find them incredibly impressive.
Me too. It really was. I sat there and just said, show me more. And they kept saying, we've got to show you something else. I said, no, let me stay right here because it really is so impressive.
Well, your answer is actually a great transition to my next question too, which is actually about female leadership in the sciences at the Smithsonian. So in an email to all the Smithsonian staff in July of 2019, you wrote, and I'm quoting, "The Smithsonian has made positive changes in making compensation more equitable. For instance, as reported by The Torch in 1978, only 5% of people employed at the GS-15 level and above were women. Today, nearly 40% of those in that grade range are women. In addition, 48% of women employed at the Smithsonian fall within the GS-13 to GS-15 and senior leadership range, representing a strong pipeline for future growth," end quote. These positive changes are certainly a testament to the commitment of Smithsonian leadership to acknowledge and combat these issues head on. With this same spirit, it's important that we acknowledge that the success of these changes is actually least apparent within the science research units and museums. Based on data accumulated from public sources in September 2020, we see that male directors dominate in the science units. There's actually only a single female director of any of the science research centers and museums. And that is obviously to a greater extent than what we see within the culture and history museums. What steps does the Smithsonian Institution take to diversify leadership across the Smithsonian museums and research centers, especially those that focus on science?
It's important to me that my whole career has been about finding fairness, opening doors for others, making sure that the assumptions that stand in the way of people rising up, of people providing leadership, are really challenged. And for me, I've always felt it is so crucial that you have to take wisdom from all parts of the organization. And if women aren't in positions of leadership, that wisdom is often not taken. And that's a loss. I feel very strongly that, as proud as I am of some of the changes we've made, that there's a lot of work still to do. And I'm committed to doing that work. I think in a way, partly I realize that we need at the Smithsonian a chief diversity officer, somebody who's going to take on these issues as a daily part of what they do, to work collaboratively with the museums and research centers to make sure that the standard arguments, oh, there's not enough people in the pipeline, or that people haven't gotten the experience they need, that we do away with those arguments, that we create the opportunities. And just as I think that we've made major changes in the cultural part and historical and artistic part of the Smithsonian, I expect to see those changes in science as well. I think the key for me is not just to create an office and officers where people are taking that on, but to recognize, as I've said to everybody, this is the work you have to do. I don't care what part of the organization you're in. If I don't see you working to diversify, to make sure that women have major opportunities in the sciences as well, then we're not doing our job. And obviously, I want to set the tone. I want to set the tone in terms of who we hire. I want to set the tone in terms of the kind of mentorship that we want to create that ensures future generations can rise up. And maybe because I'm one of those weird secretaries that actually ran through the entire system, start out as a GS9. And so for me, I recognize that there's so much talent within the organization that we've got to eliminate those barriers so they can rise up to leadership. Ultimately, it seems to me, this is about holding me accountable, holding the rest of the Smithsonian accountable, but also create an environment that says, almost like I did when I helped to create the African American Museum, that said, this is an environment of fairness. This is an environment of diversity. This is an environment that rewards skills, regardless of gender. And so I'm holding the rest of the Smithsonian to that and hope to see the kinds of changes I want throughout the entire Smithsonian. Because we've done good work, but we're only a third of the way down the road. We got a long road to hoe.
Well, speaking about what certainly feels like a long road to hoe, as we are all still at home and teleworking in the middle of a pandemic, which is particularly difficult for women at the moment, and especially women mothers. So there's been this major factor that gets brought up time and time again, both as a contemporary and a historical issue for women in science, which is motherhood and the impact that having children has on career trajectories for women in science. There's also growing concern during the pandemic, especially for mothers, that they have been more negatively impacted than their male colleagues due to these current conditions exacerbating the inequities in childcare and home responsibilities that predominantly fall on women. So what are your words of encouragement for women scientists who are mothers like myself, trying to juggle both scientific research and I actually have a 5-year-old and a 1-year-old, so I'm also doing homeschooling and childcare right now?
Well, my oldest daughter has a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old. So I hear every day about that challenge. And I think that part of it is recognizing that this is falling disproportionately on women. What I find fascinating is I saw a survey, a poll conducted earlier in the year in the pandemic that said nearly half of men, 49%, said, oh, they've taken on the major responsibility of homeschooling now that everybody's home. But that same survey said only 3% of women agree with that assessment. And so in some ways, I think it's one, realizing that this is a real issue. I have reached out to museums and businesses around the country asking, how do you do this? How do we help find fairness and give women the support they need as they're doing this? So part of it is having flexible work schedules. Now, that's harder when you're home, right? But still, the key is to say to people, you've got to stop at a certain time so parents have time with their kids. And there's got to be a way to say that, in my daughter's case, the kids really want to homeschool around 2:00. Well, take 2 to 4 off. Maybe fill it up in the evening so you have the time to do the homeschool. And then I think it's important to realize that I've been very taken by the employee assistant program at the Smithsonian, right? And how it's really now thought about offering resources, on health and wellness, finances and family. So in other words, trying to make sure that we've got the resources that can provide the support that women need. But I think what's crucially important is that this moment is putting stress on all of us, and women are bearing more of that stress raising children. And I think in some ways, any ideas we have that people bring forward, how we can help, I want to do that. Because I really think it is a dual burden, working at home and then working at home to make sure you give your children the love and the learning they need. And I think we will do everything we can to be as supportive in that role as possible.
Yes, it is. It is a pleasure to spend so much additional time with my children, but also makes focusing on my work so much harder.
Well, as someone who, I have 2 daughters, and I was really struck how whenever there was sort of a government shutdown, I got to spend time with them, but it was a week or 2 weeks, right? And it was very special. But I realized that as special as it is, if it was 6 months, they would have additional challenges to balance out. So I recognize this, and if ever I don't realize it, when I talk to my daughter and she's trying to show me pictures of her working from home with the 5-year-old climbing on her shoulder, I suddenly realize there is an additional burden here.
Well, another often stated reason for why women choose either not to pursue careers in science or to leave research units is due to this pervasive academic culture that discriminates against women through such actions as providing fewer research and leadership opportunities, offering less research support, and even paying women scientists less than their male counterparts. Along these lines, studies have shown that the cultural biases against women of color in science are amplified even further. What role does the Smithsonian have as both a research institution and an educational platform to change the culture of science to be more inclusive?
I'm a firm believer that the Smithsonian is a bully pulpit. That on the one hand, it needs to model the behavior we expect from other places. So one is to make sure that we're doing the best we can in terms of finding fairness for women, in terms of making sure that they get the resources, the fellowships and the like. I make sure, for example, whenever I'm giving awards, I make sure that a predominant number of women get those awards. It's really important to me to send that message. But I think it's also crucial to recognize, especially for women of color, that we've got to make sure that for women generally, we've got to create better pipelines, right? We've got to do much better job of building on some of the things that the Smithsonian is starting to do. I am always touched by the She Can STEM camp at NASA that allows girls to understand more about STEM through studying aviation and flight. I have been really struck by how the Smithsonian Science Education Center is focusing on young girls in STEM. And for me, that is crucially important because I have seen too many girls being told through elementary and high school that those areas aren't for them. And I think it's crucially important for the Smithsonian to create as many opportunities as possible. And one of the things we need to do a better job of, candidly, is using women like yourself to help mentor younger women so they can see. Because part of what this is, partly, is also to help people believe that that's possible, right? And that's really an important part of this. But also, I think that what's really interesting to me is thinking about how do we make sure that we help young girls, especially girls of color, understand science is for them. Science is part of who they are. As I said, as the son of a scientist who really just wanted to do history, I remember those challenges, right? But because I had a father who was a scientist, I got to see that it was possible for somebody African-American to move into those areas. So I think part of it is making sure that we're doing as much as we can so that young girls see that this is possible. And that's why, candidly, the symposium is so important, because it does several things. One, it provides a foundational understanding for young girls, but it also provides the scholarship that helps us understand kind of where we are, where we once were, and where we need to go. And as you know, at the Smithsonian, that scholarship is the engine of all we do. And what I would argue is the key to understand where we ought to be is to say that we have done good work, but there is so much more work to do. And I really want us not to follow, but to lead. I believe that the Smithsonian, since it is such a bully pulpit, the things we do have a ripple effect in the profession. And so my goal is to make sure that we are struggling to do the best we can so that it also will help change the profession. If 5 years from now or 6 years from now, whenever they run me out of the Smithsonian, if we haven't improved the status and the number of women in science, then we failed. Not that means we've not tread water, we failed. And so my commitment is that we will make sure that as every way we can, we will grapple with these questions that have prevented women from having their share of leadership positions and really of scientific positions generally. And I think if we do that, universities will pay attention to what we're doing, as well as other cultural and scientific institutions.
Yes, absolutely. Well, so along those lines, in terms of additional issues that women in science face that we are going to need to tackle and overcome, is that there have been a number of accounts of sexual assault of female scientists reported in recent years. And even more pervasive is the issue of sexual harassment of women scientists, not always as come-ons, but often degrading and negative comments, jokes, and put-downs. These issues are brilliantly illustrated actually in a recent movie called Picture of a Scientist, which is a documentary film. What role does the Smithsonian Institution have in telling these women's stories and helping to end these pervasive problems?
You know, I did watch that documentary and it was unbelievably moving and really made me very angry. Angry because these things should never happen, but I know they do. But the notion of the kind of stereotypical put down is personal to me because I've had that often in my career. And I was once asked if I was the elevator operator at the National Museum of American History. So I understand how that is, and it's not enough to say, well, if you're tough, you can handle that. That's wrong. These things need to be confronted. And we need to recognize it is not the responsibility of women to fight these. It's the responsibility of all of us. It's the responsibility of institutions to take that on. Because what's most important is we need to make sure women believe that people will listen to them when they raise issues. Not that they have to prove, they have to just make sure that they're heard of. We have to create an environment where women feel comfortable coming forward. I'm unbelievably committed to that because I think that the Me Too movement has shown us that one of the greatest things is to illuminate these issues, but one of the greatest challenges is get people to step forward because they've been criticized before, because they don't believe they've been heard. And so we have to create an environment where people can be heard, but an environment where we make the changes that reflect so that people will believe not only are they heard, but the issues they raise are dealt with and dealt with severely. I believe so strongly that anybody that harasses somebody should be gone. I know they have rules and but they should be gone because that's unconscionable. And I've tried very hard to create a new harassment hotline for employees, have new staff whose job it is to listen and move us forward in that. And that I want to make sure that we've created both the environment and distributed resources to help people navigate the complaint process and bring those complaints forward. Ultimately, my goal is to build a workforce where women do not have to fear these issues, where women will feel comfortable that when they see it, they can confront it in a way that change will happen. Ultimately, it's about fairness. And for me, that is the number one job that I have, is to create an organization that's doing good work, but is doing good work in a fair way, in a work that models what we expect. And I believe, because I've been through it, if it's not fair, we've got to confront it and destroy it.
I love that. I love the idea of not backing down from the challenge, but confronting it head on. It's something that can be really scary, especially when you're talking about your colleagues or somebody who is has more power than you in a situation. But
and isn't it also scary in that you're putting yourself out there, right? And that you're saying this is wrong, whether it's happening to me or someone else that I know, and that takes great courage. And it takes courage because institutions traditionally say it's a minor problem or it's your problem. It's not an institutional problem. And I feel, just like I feel about the impact of the study of women in history, is that it is not the problem of the person. It is the problem that we as an institution have to make sure no one feels that they're not being heard. And so I'm really committed to that because I can't tell you how many times I've raised my hand and realized I'm the only one in the room that's worried about the issue I worry about. And I learned a long time that you've got to build allies, but you've got to demand an institution live up to the law and live up to what's right. And that's what I believe so strongly.
Well, one way of building allies that's been historically important for women in science is the role of mentorship and how that has been helpful in both retaining and promoting women. In fact, there are a number of groups, such as 500 Women Scientists and the National Academies, that have formal mentoring programs. How has the Smithsonian Institution promoted mentorship, and what steps could the institution take to grow mentorship programs in the future?
I think in some ways we've got some very good models, but I don't think we have the kind of membership across the board mentorship across the board that we need. I think it's crucially important to think about what are the specific programs that are mentoring women of color at various stages in their careers. What are the ways to make sure that we create paid internships so all kinds of people can come to the Smithsonian? How do we make sure that we're really looking at issues of fairness and diversity when we give out our pre-docs and our postdocs? And so in a way, it's really, one, looking at what are the possibilities that the Smithsonian can do to mentor people. But two, it's also really looking at, are there collaborations we can enter into? Are there places that are doing good work so that we can be part of rather than reinvent the wheel? And I think that the one thing I've learned since I've been secretary is that as wonderful as the Smithsonian is, it doesn't have broad enough shoulders to do everything. It's got to be networked and collaborative. So if we can look at what are some of the best mentorship programs that we should be part of, that's one of the ways to go at this.
That sounds fantastic. I would love to be a part of some of those programs.
Well, then you've got it, because I'm going to call you.
That sounds great. So we've seen through this symposium that the Smithsonian Institution, like other major science museums and research institutes, is not immune to the issues that women scientists face. But as you have so eloquently described today, we have a fantastic opportunity to lead by example. And that is why I am so thrilled to announce the Sparking Change workshop, which is being sponsored by both the Smithsonian Central Administration and the American Women's History Initiative. This workshop will directly tackle gender-related issues across the Smithsonian Science Research Centers and museums. And the results of that workshop will be presented directly to you and your administration for review and action. While my co-chair, Dr. Liz Harmon, and I have received much excited feedback about this workshop, we have also, unfortunately, received some trepidation from some of our female colleagues that are nervous about participating. What would you say to women at the Smithsonian who fear either retaliation or being called complainers for bringing gender-related issues to your administration's attention?
All I can say is I have fought this fight my whole life. I have fought for fairness across the board. And I think that what I want people to realize is that I'm with you, I'm on your side, and I want to make sure that the Smithsonian responds in a way that says complaining is not what we're doing. What you're doing is making an institution better. What you're doing is allowing the Smithsonian to live up to its ideals as a place for the increase and diffusion of knowledge, as a place that makes sure that that knowledge and that research comes from all quarters of the Smithsonian. And it's a place where women take their rightful lead in helping us shape what the Smithsonian can become and what science can become. I think that it's important for women to realize that with your help, we continue to take a hard look at these issues. And if we don't address them, then we failed as an institution. It seems to me that we need more comments, more people standing up, more people illuminating the dark corners so that we know what we have to do to affect change. But all I can say is that no woman that ever raised any kind of harassment issue is not complaining. Rather, what that person is doing is helping a museum, helping a research center, helping the Smithsonian be what we say we are, a place that makes America better. We can't make America better if we don't make all the women that work for us feel safe, feel valued, and feel they have the opportunity to be the best they can be.
Well, I look forward to helping coordinate the Sparking Change workshop. For all my Smithsonian colleagues who are watching now, you will be receiving additional information via email in the coming weeks about how the workshop will be structured over the coming months, and how the final project will be put together and presented to both the Secretary and his administration. Thank you, Secretary Bunch, so much for joining me today and for having this conversation. I really appreciate your time.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate your leadership. And we're in this thing together.
Just wow. What a great conversation. Thank you so much, Secretary Bunch and Dr. Lohan. I'd also like to say thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to everyone who's joined us over the last 2 weeks for our 2020 symposium, American Women of Science, Recovering History, Defining the Future. To close things out, I'll turn it over to Kevin Gover, Acting Undersecretary for Museums and Culture and co-chair of the American Women's History Initiative.
Thank you to our amazing presenters and panelists who have joined us over the past 2 weeks. This symposium has been illuminating, starting with the history of women in science, then spotlighting the present challenges and achievements of women in science. We have also seen and heard guidance about the path to a more equitable and inclusive future for the scientific workforce. While we recognize that none of this work will be easy, it is essential, and we will persevere together as a community. The Smithsonian has an important role to play in continuing the conversation about women in science beyond the symposium. With our incredible national collections that span cultural artifacts to scientific specimens, our 19 museums and 9 research centers are strategically poised for transdisciplinary work, which this symposium has shown to be incredibly powerful. As this symposium comes to a close, we have so many people to thank who have made this such a phenomenal success. Thank you to our symposium co-chairs, Drs. Elizabeth Harmon and Katrina Pagenkopp, Lohan, for helping make this year's symposium a reality. Thank you as well to Jennifer Schneider, Program Manager of the American Women's History Initiative, for the logistical planning and execution. Thanks to the Office of Special Events and Protocol and the Office of Public Affairs for your great support in organizing and publicizing this event. A special thank you to the Smithsonian Center for Learning and Digital Access for letting us borrow their How to Be a Scientist video series for this event, as well as to the Smithsonian Astrophysical Observatory, the Smithsonian Conservation Biology Institute, Smithsonian Environmental Research Center, and the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute for letting us use short videos of your brilliant scientists throughout this program. Many thanks to our Smithsonian staff who have persevered throughout these unprecedented times. We hope you tuned in for the fireside chat with Secretary Lonnie Bunch, in which we announced the upcoming Sparking Change workshop. I urge all scientists who identify as women throughout the Smithsonian to participate in this workshop. Your comments will be critical to helping the Smithsonian embrace its current status and challenge the barriers present for women in science today. We in senior leadership look forward to reading the resulting report and to engaging further with this group to address the concerns presented. We at the Smithsonian are committed to tackling these issues head-on, supporting all our scientific staff, and creating a more diverse and equitable future for science. And finally, a special thank you to all of you who have tuned in. To our external partners and collaborators, we hope that you'll join us in searching our collections and archives to continue to unveil the histories of women in science, and in collaborating with our scientists to continue to uncover the mysteries of the universe and our biodiverse planet.